At long last, Star Wars Rogue One has finally been released. Before I go any further, let me assure you all that there will be no spoilers in this review whatsoever. Okay. Now, the story of Rogue One is set roughly a week before the original trilogy, and one thing that this film does really well is that it definitely plays a good element of nostalgia, because this feels like a film that was made in the 70s and 80s, and it really does help that they're using real locations, because say for example the technology in this world, some of the computers, like the computers look dated, and I think they're trying to sort of recreate the world that we saw in the original trilogy, because that was always a bit of an issue with the prequel films, is that the technology in the prequel films looked far more advanced than the technology in the original trilogy, even though the prequels are supposed to be set before the originals. So yeah, there was always that issue, but it didn't bother me at all, because I thought that the technology, the look of the world, sorry, the worlds in this film, they settled really well, and they definitely played good parts of the story. The characters in Rogue One are very likeable. Not all of them, but the majority of them are. I liked Donnie Yen a lot. I find that his character, I think that if they took his character out, it would have played such a negative effect on this film. So I like the fact that Donnie Yen had a really good character. And he almost plays this, almost like this Obi-Wan Kenobi type character. He has such wise words to say, and his action scenes are impressive. He's like a cross between the old Obi-Wan Kenobi and the new Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's kind of got like the fighting prowess of the young, and the wisdom of the old one. So yeah, he was like a good blend between the two. Jyn Erso is really good. She's very likable. She's not necessarily this hero figure. She's basically, I think she, just like the rest of the rebellion, they've been through some terrible times. They know that they have to do some terrible things just to get by and to fight against the Empire. But they definitely made her character really likable, and I do appreciate that. Krennic, the Imperial director, the guy who essentially helped create the Death Star, or at least oversaw its construction, he is a delightful villain. To say that he's like a Saturday morning cartoon villain wouldn't do him justice. I'd say he plays an Imperial really well, and you can tell that the actor enjoyed himself when he was performing his scenes. He definitely enjoyed himself, you can tell. And Darth Vader, now again, no spoilers, but Darth Vader, I think for those of you who expected Darth Vader to play a major part in this film, you might be a bit disappointed, because he has, I say, just he's little more than a cameo, I think. He doesn't appear in the film that much, but let me tell you this, when he does appear in the film, he makes his presence felt, especially at the end of the film. Again, like I said, no spoilers, but at the end of the film, let's just say he reminds the audience of why he's a terrifying villain, and I shall just leave it at that. But the action scenes were really good. They weren't confusing. They didn't have that old problem where you've got so much happening on the screen, you can't tell what's going on, you can't tell who's fighting who. They didn't have that problem whatsoever. Everything was clear, crystal, clean. The space battle in Rogue One was done really well. You can clearly tell what's going on, who's fighting who. And the big land battle at the end, that was really creative, and it was really, really nice to look at as well. They had a great location of an Imperial base, and the whole battle sequence, especially with regards to the AT-ATs. I know I expressed some concerns about the look of the AT-ATs, but I have to say, the film was so good, I didn't notice any imperfections, so I've got no complaints there. And with regards to the production of the film itself, you can tell that they put a lot of hard work into the story. They are determined to expand this universe, this franchise, the cinematic franchise anyway, as much as they can. And one thing that was particularly surprising, now again no spoilers, is that you see some characters from the original trilogy that you would think couldn't possibly be in Rogue One, because because the original characters in the original trilogy are a fair bit older now than they were, back then. But you see them in their younger selves. In I'm not going to say which characters, or I'm not going to say who these particular characters are, but you see these characters in their younger selves in Rogue One. They've essentially done what they did in Tron Legacy, if you remember. Is that because in Tron Legacy they CG'd a young Jeff Bridges, and they pretty much did that in Rogue One. Now the effect was really good, but they're not quite there yet. The technology isn't quite perfect. They are getting there, but it's not quite perfect. And a thought struck me is that this could open up some doors, because since the original trilogy, I think the last film was was released in the early mid 80s. They always had this problem though, where like they can't really make more films based straight after Return of the Jedi's, because the age difference between the actors now compared to what they were back then is so great. They realistically they couldn't do it. But since they're actually introducing these characters that we saw in the original films as CG elements, as like young CG versions of themselves, it does open up possibilities. So, but I will leave you to make your own judgment on that. I know a few people didn't quite like it, but I have no problem with it. Again, like I said, the technology's not quite perfect, but they are getting there. And I think that since Rogue One is looking like it's going to be incredibly successful, I'm looking forward to see what other risks Disney does with this franchise. So, would I recommend Star Wars Rogue One? Or is it Rogue One, a Star Wars story? I always get a bit confused about how the title goes, but anyway. Yes, I would absolutely recommend this film. It is a great addition to the Star Wars franchise. It's very enjoyable. You'll love the battle scenes, the aesthetics, the costumes, the locations, just the general feel of the film. You will absolutely love it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.